Come on in. It's nice to see or sort of see you all. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rails Wednesday afternoon poetry reading series. This is the 109th Wednesday reading. It's been curated or is being curated by Ann Tardos. And this reading is called Love is Found in All the Ways Friends Speak. Joining Ann will be Marcella Durand, Evelyn Reilly, and Jennifer Firestone. Before I introduce Ann, I just want to say a couple quick things. One is hello, and the second is if you're new to the series, you might keep the chat open and take a look at it from time to time as various points of information about our terrific readers' endeavors will be posted there with links, as well as information on the Brooklyn Rail itself. My name's Anselm Berrigan. I'm the poetry editor for the Rail, and I work on this series with the terrific staff here. And I'm really happy to have Ann, Marcella, Evelyn, and Jennifer with us today. We do this every week, so please feel free to join us any Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern time if you got the time. Ann Tardos, a fellow of the New York Foundation for the Arts, is the author of 12 books of poetry and editor of 3 posthumous collections of poetry by Jackson McLough. Her work has been translated and published in dozens of anthologies and journals around the world. She pioneered a unique multilingual writing style, often complementing her texts with video stills, photographs, and collages. Her writing is renowned for its fluid use of multiple languages and its innovative forms. And she's worked in numerous media, creating performance pieces, radio plays, videos, and musical compositions. You can find out more about what she's been up to at her website, anntardos.com. Please welcome Ann to the Rail reading series.
Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see Michael O'Driscoll, Simone Forti, Rachel Duplessis, Susan B., Michael Byron. I mean, amazing, amazing. Wonderful. So all I can do is thank Anselm for inviting me to get this reading together. And I've invited the 3 poets you mentioned, whose work I've admired for quite some time. Marcella Durand, Evelyn Reilly, and Jennifer Firestone will read, and I will read at the end. Marcella Durand is a recipient of the C.D. Wright Award in Poetry from the Foundation of Contemporary Art. Her recent books include To Husband is to Tender, The Prospect, and a translation of the French Oulipo poet Michèle Métail&rsquo's book-length poem, Earth's Horizons, Les Horizons du Sol, a gargantuan task to accomplish when you think she followed Métail's rigorous constraints of 48 characters per line, 24 lines per page, which comprises one long sentence of continuous enjambment. In my eyes, anyone who translates an Oulipo work into English or another language is nothing short of heroic. I think of Gilbert Adair's translation of Georges Perrec's narrative book, La Disparition, written without ever using the letter E. Adair replicated this constraint in the English version perfectly. Marcella's own writing often addresses environmental crises. In an interview with Janet Leigh, Durand says, the transition from the geological to the human is interesting. At what point is humanity joined to the environment? She adds, we are starting to understand now that there's a human to nature spectrum, that there are connections that we need to understand and still do not understand, like what is our own ecological niche in the history of the world? the concept of the Anthropocene, especially that humans are an actual geological event. We are a thin layer of plastic. It requires us to stand outside ourselves as a species and as existing in a physical space that has such deep history well beyond our lifespan. The clarity of Marcella's poetry always amazes me. Marcella.
Thank you, dear Anne. What a beautiful invitation and introduction. And I'm so delighted to be here with dear friends and you, Jen, Evelyn, and thank you to the Brooklyn Rail and dear friend Anselm too. Thank you all. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to read recent projects. These have all never been read to anyone else before. And I'm going to start with some translation, non-Oulipo translations, thank God, from the French architect Claude Ledoux, who wrote about architecture in prose, but since he passed away well before copyright asks and such, I can mess around with his work and reimagine it as poetry. So I'm going to start with a couple of those and then continue on. So this is from his book, The Architecture, Claude Ledoux. The author of nature composed the universe out of atoms. Chaos developed, and around the world of space gave an attractive impulsion, organized the azure spread, the blazed velocity. The sea's deepness, the ways of liquid trace a new center and provoked industry. People living in the world, work. The tales we are told of a drop of milk escaped from Jura's breast. Perspective view of the shopping walk, Ledoux, page 270. Here, the deserts and melancholy roots seem to brighten. Nature's immensity opens. We will read what research she develops with the help of art. I lift via imagination's wings. Do you see that cloud charged with night's humid vapor? It obscures the tableau and repels the fabricated light that follows it. The sun escapes the cloud's obscurity. It animates the vegetation. The blue heavens are colored by clouds on fire. The mountain, the forest, the rivers clarify, and the world's harmony begins. And then sort of inspired by Ledoux, I've been working on some poems that fit into a project called Circles for Wheel Makers, as one of his buildings was literally in a circle shape for wheel makers. But I think that has some resonance for things beyond making wheels. So this is from Circles for Wheel Makers. The ocean returns, although it never really went away, and how really is questioned in what is real and how language is real, maybe. And it intersects with the real and what is a word for reality to express how the reality continuum can extend from the human in a way to include, no, welcome, what is currently known as non-human or nature or ecology or the planet. And all these words that are not the same and not quite what we need and do not express how human continues into, exists, intersects, is linked to, interlinked, is part of, is not quite part of, what is around us and makes us and keeps us and is us, but we see it as very much not us and act as though we continue to be separate. What word would that be? The ocean, it returns. Where the water collects, it makes a horizon. There will be the place at which the sun rises, where mind might and should quiet. Except there's not much quiet to the mind or to the water. Pen without ink. The ink dries at the 7th line, so the 7th line is heavier, the brush having been redipped, and rebrushed, the lines go faster and faster until the merest turn of color shows against the paper's grain. In the sun, the light reveals the paper's molecules, the brush's drag, being dragged against it. How essential small shadows are to the visual. Spaces of relief after Rachel Blau du Plessis, who I think I see over here. White flowers look like shadows of their leaves, and such observations seem no longer possible as needs and wants transmogrify into waste of time and loss of sensibility. The unwillingness to allow others time and space and onward until always on our feet we march, unobserving how leaves of flowers might somehow not still be green, vanished as so many others, fading as others. Am I into dailiness too? Of course, there's every day, the sun, then night, and within that time I sometimes find episodic or relentless. Ismail says too, I want to go back to that time. I wish we could go back to that time. And every year we go back, and every time it is different. Every time is different. As I am here now in a day that was new before, but the sun is getting higher and hotter, and later it will set again, and then the stars or the clouds over the stars. Meditation with Rachel, October 19th, 2022. The breath into the shoulders, the shoulders hitch down, more down the shoulders, down more, down by increments, little crunchy increments, a millimeter crunch down, then to the stomach resistant. It is resistant. It does not relax, so I must breathe into it, allow it to sense air, even if still resistant. The intestines are resistant, but are receiving air. The hips respond and respond with a place. The ocean, the breath comes to that ocean. The memory of the ocean in the hips is vivid. Today, they are by the ocean, the light on the expanse of the ocean. The hips stay in the ocean, and I allow them to be at the ocean and bring my lungs and stomach to the ocean. I remember the shoulders and let them hitch down again as they have hitched back up while I was with the hips. Then back to the hips and their place by the ocean, and the light and the air and the body joins them there at the ocean. To think about coming back all together to this place. We all come back together to this place of all the noise. The noise is so intense, so much noise. The train, the beeping, the construction, the train, the traffic, the airplanes, the beeping. Think about the continuous beeping. There we go. Think about the continuous beeping and wonder if the city leaves a beeping machine overnight and always. And in that thought, back to the breath, to accept the noise, that I'm in this noise with the breath. And my ears are sensitive, acutely sensitive, but I can hardly hear Rachel through the noise. And then the bird goes on and on and on, the bird. And when it stops, it is like silence, even with the train. And then I breathe into the ground and my feet feel hot. So much heat breathing up from the ground like nuclear heat. What is going on? So much heat with breathing from the ground. What is the ground here? So much steam heat and pipes and apartments, and over to my right, the trauma of trees cut down, the sense of the ground under my feet through heat, and up to my shoulders again to breathe them back down in crunchy increments. But my jaw has been relaxed this whole time, sagging. My sagging jaw and jowls and chin, maybe I am okay with the sagging. And we move to wrists and fingers in which we have not dwelled yet. And I think of writing this down as the wrists and fingers relax and become creative. Walking through the trees, through the night, walking through all the worries, the circular thinking, the circles of worries, the circles of trees, walking through the night, then the woods, and walking the city, from trees to the city, walking, walking in the car to the car, walking when carried as being carried, the body being carried while walking, still walking as body ends and mind begins, the walking body, the walking mind, the mind walking in circles as the body is carried, as the mind ends and the body begins, the body walking in the city through its abstraction, the abstract city, its concrete reality and its abstractions. Dust and threads of thinking is walking. Solidity falls upon the body as worries in the city, and through abstractions and reality, through dust and threads and traffic, collisions, walking through collisions, expected collisions and possible collisions, fear of collisions, walking through and falling, possible falls and collisions, expected falling or potential falls, walking through falls and tripping, through concrete, walking through galleries and stores and spaces while thinking, the mind and the body walking through spaces of art and stores and concrete, through families and people and friends walking with or apart, families and friends and people with worries and problems, walking with friends with possible problems and joys and distractions. And the mind begins as bodies walk together with distractions and joys and conversations, and laughing inside the abstractions, the dust and concrete spaces, talking through galleries and stores, walking, the distractions of walking in mind and circles, talking in conversations through spaces, walking through distractions until mind begins with body and walking, until the trueness of walking, until the body becomes walking and the mind walking. Distractions dissolve to state of walking until all the walking about the body, all the activity of walking, body carrying mind, and mind carries body into the true state of walking, all of it around, and of the body within walking, and the body mind about walking. One more poem. The eighth climate. To unleaf, deleaf, fall or leave, to fall, falling, to drift with winds, to dry, to rustle, to breathe along air rather than inhale, to move rather than be moved in accumulation, acclimation. Acclimation to climate, climate of the 7 bands of atmosphere, of the 7 latitudinal stripes of the earth, upon which the longest day ranges in length, from half hour to hours to celestial intervals, upon which the longest day on earth moves in a shadow over the planet's face, a dark edge over continents and oceans, over a myriad of niches and habitats, systems recovering after defoliations and debacles. Defoliation is a harsh externality, a sort of war against the continuing extraordinary that is a tree. Is weather a defoliation, a worsening of climate violence on us who live with it? Inmost, inside, inward, who brought it completely upon ourselves. Of senescence, which is age without youth and leaves falling. 7 astrological zones corresponded to 7 planets before we transitioned from space to time, from matter to energy, before we became occupied with months and years. 7 bands of climate on 7 continents, whose impacts on ocean is more than they weigh. Do continents float on water or nickel? How deep do continent roots go? When can we know the true heart of our home planet? I was born in the 8th climate. The stars cause many to wonder about the climate that shoves us under. In describing stars, it's most convenient to begin with those never in our climate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Evelyn Reilly is a poet, scholar, and environmentalist. Her books include Styrofoam, Apocalypso, and most recently, Echolocation. Her work has appeared in many anthologies and was recently included in the Feral Atlas, the More-than-Human Anthropocene, a multimedia compendium of work by scientists, thinkers, poets, and artists. She's also a member of the steering committee of the climate activist group 350 NYC, a group that, among other things, recognizes that a just, equitable future cannot be built without acknowledging the importance of indigenous peoples who share our struggle to protect the planet. As New Yorkers, they honor the Lenape, Wappinger, Canarsie, and Rockaway peoples. It is inevitable that environmental ecological concerns are on our minds as the Earth's depletion has become a palpable menace to our very existence. I've heard of global warming since the early 60s. Predictions of overpopulated cities have become reality, and we adapt and adapt until one day we may no longer be able to. Reilly's ecopoetics contribute to our culture in important and elegant ways. John Ashbery wrote about her book Styrofoam, a vast Sargasso sea of plastic fragments the size of a continent has been discovered on the Pacific Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean. How do we go about living in what Evelyn Reilly defines as our infinite plasticity, prosperity, plenitude, and still have room for poetry? Styrofoam might just show us how to do this. Evelyn Reilly.
Thank you. Anne, thanks so much for these really thoughtful introductions. They're wonderful. It's great to read with some of my favorite poets today. And thanks to Anne and Anselm and the people at the Brooklyn Rail for doing this. I'm just going to start with one short poem from a new series that I'm working on called The Plankton Chronicles. It's called Urchin Cosmos. That's urchin as in sea urchin. And if you've never seen them, sea urchins have these incredibly beautiful larvae that look like tiny iridescent spinning helmets. So that might help with listening to this poem. A body lies down on the ocean to float among invisibilities, scent of the word helium, commotion of clouds, atmospheric touch. Inside the head, a time machine, a computer, and a broken plank, among other debris drifting in the swell of anthropic realities, the chaos that always increases. Tiny whirling dervishes ride currents of the disharmony of nature as the sea exposes itself to the disappearances of night. Embryos, larvae, freely swimming adults all throw themselves into the ecstatic struggle played out against a darkening but strangely comforting horizon line. Life stages, consequences, uncertain results, this pinpoint of self, night sky. Then I thought for the rest of the time, I'm just going to read from a series of poems called Sleeping with Trees. This is a series of nighttime meditation on the vegetal life that goes outside, that continues on outside our windows while we're sleeping. The gates to nothingness open 1/8 of an inch each night, framed by trees that grow exuberantly. Among the leaves, blooms of durable insects. A limb reaches out into the emptiness, seeking to make contact, then grasp. You study all this from your bed through your night goggles, the world that goes on without us. The drawers of thinking won't close, so overflowing with non-disposables in the ambushes of memory. Nothing put away stays in place. The sound of no longer needed body parts dropping to the ground. You take a tiny rake to clean up this mental landscape, a sort of curator gardener, paying your respects to the wakefulness of trees. Not just any plant, the most sensitive of plants bends to your touch, your presence. How could it be otherwise, mimosa, waking up to the weeping of flower heads and larvae, the usual worm chatter and dissonant turf? Trying to listen differently, seeking a new kind of intimacy, to be close as commas, like grass. Rousseau's grass in particular. With each new blade I encounter, I say to myself with satisfaction, here is yet another plant. Cold, hardworking birds drop out of a sky ghosted with the colors of their disappearance. You lay a torn sweatshirt on the pyre, some poems, an empty container of Roundup, intone some prophecies based in statistics. Sleeping with moon enameled branches and silent pulses of missing insects, spears of cheap pillow down set up a battle in one ear, while the trees persist in their refusal to be individuals, the rhizomes that aid and abet them spread. All this with the only light coming from the crack under the door to the common hallway. You remember the words, first reconcile with the neighbors. This is the only true and hardest prayer. Sipping cosmic energy through light green straws, at the same time digging toes into the timelines of the dead. A disturbance that's not really disturbing to the resting places of the naturally interred. Someone's endless pleading, another's eternal worry still roam the hunting grounds of the villi and microvilli. The ceiling nods in concert with the heads of dry grass rattling open your dream, just as an imaginary spring was coming into bloom again. But you live in the age you live, the sound of generations beat down on your head, using it as a drum skin of accusation. All that is broken, broken, broken. Out of the tree cradling plastic, a forecast of sea. Above it, a stellar umbrella unfolds for the 14 billionth time. Somewhere a reckoning ticks, but you aren't listening as you clip the eyebrow hairs that curl down into the eyes of the beloved. The notion of the soul as interiority, what crap tonight. The trees multiply the extensions and extensions of extensions as metallic blankets cover the ankles of sleeping children. The night is loud with the becoming of insects, the silence of plants digesting another day's worth of star material along the fence lines. Into the war poems of the environment comes the bright clamor of the rich putting on their armor. You get up to clear some space on your desk of doubt, looking for a definition of love you lost somewhere. Chains of ordinary kindness self-perpetuating in thin air, a force that emanates radially. Now creatures free from bilateral being are entangled in a canopy of forest thinking, drenched in the language of rising seas. Octopi and other cephalopods offer such appealing methods of propulsion and perception, you are almost carried off by them. But the wind is picking up and you're afraid of losing power. You open the windows to feel the wet unleafing of fixed positions, other planetary sympathies. The iterations of the leaf repeat the verbiage of the foliage imperfectly, while the flowers on the wallpaper recite a mantra of misalignment, repetition that speaks differently. Every bloom brings a new structure of feeling into the room. Each twin sleeps under a different shoulder in the womb of dreams. Things that close in order to open again, revisitations of old spiritual possessions. So what has been the nature of your participation, the method of your self-dispersion? Have you taken part in disruption when disruption was needed? What limit have you set for your exploration? What floor for your excavations? Why just there and not further? Do you find these questions unnerving? Is that why you're both sweating and shivering? Am I handing you a bouquet or a prize or an opportunity? Tell us about your position in the scheme of ecosystem services, as opposed to, say, these trees. No need to worry. This is all just for informational purposes. Now diagram the nodes of your connectivity. Don't forget to include the burrs on your pants today, the jet streams and the rafts, the stowaways riding the plastic ropes of the oceans. Snow takes the place of leaves among things that fall inaudibly. All that happens but is unheard. The desire to live inside a picture, streams and mountains, rocks and gorges. This is the aesthetic of detachment. Trees are to landscape as books to decorating, a poet says, obscene. This is the environmental aesthetic. Another brings your attention to the friends admiring the snow in an era of general depravity, the aesthetic of being together in violent times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Jennifer Firestone is a winner of the Marsh Hawk Press's Robert Creeley Memorial Prize. She's the author of 9 books of poetry. Among them are Story 10, Gates and Fields, and Swimming Pool. She co-edited with Dana Teen Lomax Letters to Poets, Conversations about Poetics, Politics, and Community, and is currently co-editing with Marcella Durand a book about feminist avant-garde poetics. She's an associate professor of literary studies at the New School's Eugene Lang College, and is also the director of their Academic Fellows Pedagogy Program. A few years ago, I visited her class at the New School and saw the generosity and courage with which she presented some of the most daring, the most difficult contemporary writings. She invited, probably still does, some of the most interesting and avant-garde feminists. I have always admired her boundless energy, enthusiasm, and vast knowledge. In 10, a book she wrote while recovering from knee surgery in great pain, she decides to write 10 lines a day, no matter what. We can feel her pain, but at times she also finds a serene tranquility. The breeze, the trees oblige. Be still. Appease my heart, my nerve long gone. Jennifer Firestone.
Thank you so much, Anne. One of the amazing, risky artists, writers that I invited to my class was, of course, you. So you're describing yourself, and I agree with you. Thank you for curating this event, Anne. Thank you, Ansem, and everyone at the Brooklyn Rail behind the scenes for this incredible reading. Thank you, my friends who are reading today, who I learn so much from, always. I'm going to read only from a new series that I've been working on. It's evolved during the pandemic, and it really, the only thing I'll say is it's really coming out of this very keen awareness that I've developed of missing being with my friends, particularly in the beginning of the pandemic, missing that in-person contact, and simultaneously being aware of how much I miss seeing art and going to a space where there was art and being overwhelmed by art. So I'll read art history. I decided I would see friends while I saw art. The two are a friendship, the conversation intermittent with image, streaming, and vivid junctions. The space where people move between frames, bathroom, cafe, sun slant, or fog roll. The artists alive and dead, the friends living. During COVID, my interior became bleak. I am not a craftsperson or artisan. I write words in touch with what I see. I'm a teacher and have truce with collaboration. In COVID, I watched a lot of TV. Museums opened up virtually, but that made me sad. I didn't want to be on my computer looking at art. I didn't want to point the mouse to be led to a room to reveal the biography of each artist. I was remiss about openings and tours. It wasn't that I think artists shouldn't continue. It was that I stopped. It wasn't until later that I could see what a bench in a museum could offer, or if I lingered on a deserted stairwell or pushed the exit to a cold front of air. In high school, my art history teacher clicked slide to slide, mostly Renaissance, some Impressionists. I was crying heavily from a breakup, and she asked me to leave the room. I love the click of the projector, its breathing hum, the intermediate space between image and image, what would be next, which colors instantly stain my pupils. A certain intimacy presides when you're at a museum, a rebellion against stringent rules, social cues, purposefully slow with the abstract rows of words on the placards, waiting until you move so I can follow. We studied Vermeer's Light in one of your half pauses, the one where you stopped with hands on hips, the chiseled, creamy faces, an elegance buried in our deepest selves, the tender lips and placed hair, the light shining on features. Though expensive, I meet more and more at the museum's cafes to enjoy a museum croissant. I have a costly habit of buying art books. I'm sure I bought one with you. I don't hide it anymore, but tell my friends we must visit the bookshop. I flip through the pictures, my fingers touching the nice paper, and through the reproductions, I receive a glimmer on my skin. I'm partial to books that are art. These books are pretty, and because I have been there in front of the art, the books are alive. A lot of people take photos of what they see, and I find out about art this way. When I'm about to take a photo, I say, why am I taking this? I want to know about my desire and communication with others. If it's up on a public wall, is it fair game? What if I take a bad photo, my reflection bouncing off, or the scale is wrong? I went to an exhibit about loss and shot many photos of people's words, their losses projected as floating clouds of text on the walls. The installation was located at an old church. The fall trees were ruby sapphire. I asked my partner, is it okay to post these photos since they're already part of an exhibit? In COVID, I talk less on the phone, and I notice the leaves of a tree and the black cat on the outside table, or the rain hitting the mud, or when the light from the sun is ecstatic. I watch a Laurie Anderson lecture on my phone where she speaks about how we buy pictures of things. When I look at the screen, I have to imagine what the lavender sweater would do to my skin tone, what a mix of wool and cotton feels like. During the summer, my mother took the children to Marshall's. They didn't know what is a store, what to do under looming lights, linoleum shine. One sat down right near the entrance on the floor and read his phone. I walked up and down the aisles, not knowing where to go. The dressing room seemed far away from the clothes, and the housewares seemed near the giftware. First private museums were created by wealth, prestige. They were called wonder rooms. I wonder how much the attendees were art lovers or more attuned to status. The other night, I was at a house with lots of large art, and I wondered if any of it was really expensive or authentic, and yet I don't really know what either of these terms mean. The Metropolitan is the second most visited museum in the world. The Louvre is the first. You could probably guess this. I used to mark museums in travel books before I had a relationship to art. I remember the chase to the Mona Lisa, my heart pounding like a mystery, shuffling my feet quicker than the next person. It was hard to see the Mona Lisa, not because of crowds, but because I had seen replicas so many times that they had gotten into my seeing. There's always the filter of the room, the light, cologne, language wafting, the mood, chemistry of spectator. When I saw David and all those naked and muscular sculptures in Italy, I was shocked to see that they were so violent, so male. I couldn't see the lines, the stone. Or when I leaned my head back to look at the Sistine Chapel and felt inadequate, like I didn't understand the craft of detail, the labor. I don't know if this is a dream, but I'm walking in the Metropolitan and passing on both sides of me is bust after bust. I said during COVID, when I'd see people again, I'd also see art, a 2 to 3 hour event with some structure. We would talk, but then we wouldn't, as we would be looking. Then we would have material to discuss the artwork. And sometimes my eyes, my brain would be so full, like Charles Olson's sense of kinetic energy rolled into my veins, and I would talk and walk in a speedy manner and seem a bit off. I wasn't sure how to handle my body. I wanted to run or jump around and yell or laugh. The intensity of a blue might reach so far into me, it would feel like a kind of surgery or transplantation. The collages amaze me as much as the classical painters. I feel proud that I can walk with people among rooms and my friends and see art. This is what we are doing, such a pleasure kind of doing. I schedule it, but then I'm uncharted, wobbly. The other art viewers look so fantastic. I kind of want to know them or stare at their red boots or polka dotted shirt. I want to ask the guards what they see. What is it like staring at this art, at the people looking at art? People behave in all sorts of ways. There are serious nodders and the ones led by headphones. There are the talkers, the ones with companions who come to chat like they are eating lunch. There are the ones looking to find a date or on the phone. Some voices will travel so loudly that the words become the art and all you see is their syntax. Sometimes a view gets in the way of art, like the 4th floor of the Whitney, where my friend said, "It's hard to look at what's in this room with that view." She pointed to a building, but all I gazed at was a room of clouds. Is nature art? And why do I say nature? If I take a red leaf, curled, ragged edge, and say it's a boat or a decaying heart, am I being artistic? Would nature want that? Why am I stopping to sketch trees' shadows or catch the dappled light? I insist on letting a chickadee free from my gaze. I think, I don't want to be seen the way people see me. Thank you.
Wow. How am I going to follow these acts? Wonderful readings, really, all three of you. Thank you so much. I will read from a poem that some of you have heard maybe more than once, and but I abbreviated it, truncated it to fit today's time restriction. So it's called Andante, scales and proportions for a chemical orchestra amid the fraying social norms. In the middle of the onslaught of nonstop information, I find myself in the forest of a multitude of facts, like astronomers who think of the Milky Way galaxy as champagne, full of bubbles, because it seems that we live inside the so-called local bubble, where, among other things, Yiddish scholars are rescuing women's novels from obscurity. Their frustration with men's advocacy for unrestrained sexuality and their lack of concern about the consequences for her. Were I an astronomer, I would spend much time gazing at images of our galaxy's center. Never get tired of it. You could say that I submit to what is. Neither could I resist the image of a marine biologist. Neither could I resist the image a marine biologist paints of the blue whale's heart that's the size of a car and typically only beats twice a minute when diving, and that a human could easily swim through its aorta. Assuming there's a human being swimming around there, the animal would have to be dead, or maybe anesthetized by a team of veterinary cardiologists who would be trying to work on the whale's heart. A heart that is seemingly so full of enthusiasm and joy when the animal launches itself out of the water, blowing fountain before taking a deep breath. And while all this is happening, our local bubble continues to grow at about 4 miles a second. We are in the midst of an explosion, and think of it as everyday life. Sometimes I worry about 3D dust mapping, which allows us to see the local bubble's surface, where Antares, the red supergiant, is expected to blow any century now. Image and thought, the deep and wide current of consciousness, where my brain is subject to a system of predictions that evolved from primordial feelings like pain and hunger, processes that arise from a chemical orchestra deep in my viscera. Within this local bubble, I can imagine that a frisbee is being tossed to a young dog who expertly retrieves it in midair, while in the exact same moment, a giant asteroid crashes into Jupiter's top clouds after a 2-year orbit around the planet, just as Charles W. Mills, a UK-born and Jamaica-raised philosopher whose life's work was the interrogation and critique of structural racism and the foundation of liberalism, dies, just as Florida's famous dolphin Winter dies of twisted intestines. Wow. Moography, a technique used to peer inside nuclear reactors and Egyptian pyramids, maps the insides of hazardous volcanoes, while back in Egypt, giant storms force deadly fat-tailed scorpions out into the open, stinging hundreds, killing many. I see that my brain deals with fragments, painful shards, random thoughts, fearsome images, rolling down the stripped mountainside into glaciers where prospects erode as the ice dries up amid the fraying social norms. Words feel like change. Pockets feel like words. Because SpaceX's capsule has more interior space than a minivan, but less than a studio apartment. And as far as I can see, I'm in a continuous flow of information processing mode, searching for clues in ancient waters. Ancient Waters is also the name of a water recycling plant in KwaZulu-Natal, where the local university's motto is to stay calm and do your best. I should also mention the 2 or more fused aromatic rings of carbon whose natural sources include forest fires, bushfires, volcanic eruptions, while man-made sources consist of various pyrolytic processes during industrial operations, incinerations, vehicular emissions, power generations. So when the time comes, I would like to be buried rather than being cremated so as not to add to the fused aromatic rings of carbon. The enthusiasm of a human child, her gusto for life, her concept of mind, the multitudes of paths to choose from, the hordes of cultures to familiarize with and adapt to, endless stairs to climb, unrelenting poverty, a lot of who am I's amid the fraying social norms. Beloveds to lose, beloveds to find. Much thinking and listening to the moon over the gleaming Mediterranean in complete silence as we turn around in interstellar circles amid the fraying social norms. The origin of language and the question of meaning. Language is always more or less vague, so that what we say is never quite precise. And at what point does the reader become the writer? I live in a poverty-stricken building frozen in the act of collapse. Holding something, feeling something, squeezing someone's hand, pondering intriguing concepts. The writer's attention, her intention, and the rags of time. The zeptosecond, the shortest unit of time ever measured, a trillionth of a billionth of a second, or a decimal point followed by 21 zeros and a 1, is the time it takes for light to cross water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you, Marcella, Evelyn, and Jen for those great readings. And thanks everyone for being here. We'll throw the mics open so everyone can say hello and goodbye in just a second. Next week, we'll have a reading that will feature Ed Steck, Jennifer Sung, Amma Birch, Courtney Bush, and me, because why the fuck not? And so join us if you can. And yeah, let's unmute everybody, as they say, and open the cubes up, and we'll send y'all off into your day.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was
Great
beautiful.
reading.
Much.
Great reading.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Love to you, Anne and Michael.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael. And hi, Michael.
Thank you, Michelle.
Great reading.